Unchained Melody was my father's favorite song. It was written for the movie Unchained, which debuted in 1955 and is a performance by the Righteous Brothers in 1965, five short years after he met my mother, was his favorite performance. With all the hospital stays, it was no wonder this was his favorite song. With the weird lyrics, wait for me, I'll be coming home, wait for me. I'm like my dad in many ways. But sorry, Father Bob, I'm more like my mom, and I have a lot to say today. First off, my family would like to thank everyone for the support that we received, not just in the past few days, but in the past few years, as my father's health slipped away. There are too many of you to list by name. Just know that we know who you are, and we love you for it. Thank you for being here today. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a stronger one to say goodbye to a man. Before I say too much about my father, I do want to recognize my mother and the care that she gave him over the years. In times of strife, when my mom and I would argue, and with Mark, she would say to us, "You have no idea how hard this is." And she was right. We would hear it all the time from her. "You have no idea how hard this is." Statements like that always come from people who are ready to give up. People who have already given up. People who are no longer going to honor the vows that they took on the day they got married, in sickness and in health. It wasn't always pretty. Let me tell you, love rarely is. Everyone in this room who has seen a loved one fade can attest to the level of stress it puts on a caregiver. So in the end, this became a story about a woman who loved her husband so much that she honored his wishes through his final days, at the expense of her own health and relationships. My father hated the hospital, and he hated rehab facilities. For all the time he spent there, can you blame him? He had one fear: to be put in a home. Facilities scared him. Every single person close to my parents, including many of you sitting in this room today, said, "It's time. Put Patrick in a home. You cannot take care of him anymore. Put him in a home." We would talk on the phone weekly, and she would say with conviction, "I would never do that to him." She never did. My father loved our home. He worked hard for it. He took care of it with pride. He sure as hell wouldn't let us leave it a mess. I might even say, as a last gift to my mother, he fought, and he hung on long enough for that renovation from the VA to be done, so that even after he was gone, there would be a place for her that he could say, "I'm taking care of you." Even in his passing, he was planning on taking care of my mother. In return, she gave him the best gift that she could, his home until the end. She cared for him where he always wanted to be. Your love for Dad was evident. You deserve recognition for what you did. You honored the man who honored you. You gave for the man who gave for you. And you loved the man who loved you. So thank you. With that said, it's an honor and a bit of a tragedy to stand here and talk about my father's life today. No, to celebrate it. There have been and will continue to be stories told throughout today and the coming weeks, so let me start with my favorite. The day my father had open heart surgery, we were stressed. None of us had ever gone through anything like this before. Sitting in the waiting room, doctors came out, told us the surgery had gone well, and they gave us updates. They told us we could go in and see him, telling us he would look awful. His voice would be hoarse, and that he would be in a bad mood. They simply didn't know my dad. We went into the room, and he was awake, and he asked one by one for us to come over and give him a kiss. "Nancy, give me a kiss," and she did. "Mark and Jessica, give me a kiss," and she did. They did. Eric and I did. And Uncle Mike. Uncle Mike was there, and he said in that raspy voice, "Mike." So Uncle Mike stood up, went over to the bed. My dad said, "Hold on, let me roll over so you can kiss my ass." My dad would chuckle and shake his head to think that so many people were in one room today to hear about him, because for the majority of his life, he was the one that wanted to know how you were doing. From the hospital bed, he would call just to check in. He called Patty Strong on the anniversary of Dick Strong's death, just to see how she was doing. My father wasn't even conscious on the day that Dick Strong passed away. He was in the hospital himself. But from the hospital, he called in on the anniversary to check in on her. Think about that for a minute. In an era when we don't check in anymore, he never stopped. That's who he was. In 2005, when my father first started to get sick to the point where I took notice, I got him this book called Between You and Me, Dad. There were questions for him to fill in, and true to his ways, a man of a few words, most of these were answered with one or two words, and many of the pages were left completely blank. There were a few things that he told me that growing up he wanted to be a priest, then he wanted to be a businessman. He knew that he had no interest in working in the steel plant. But those things don't really matter that much compared to what else he wrote in this book. In this book, in as few words as possible, are the same lessons that he taught us with a lifetime worth of examples. I wanted to touch on a few of those lessons that he taught Mark and myself, and the man he was for my mother. We can learn how to fight. One of the questions in this book asks, what characteristics do you and I share? Stubbornness and persistence is all he wrote. No explanation. Over the next few years, I learned exactly what that meant. He took every single medical condition that we could throw at him: leukemia, diabetes, open heart surgery, stroke, kidney failure, loss of eyesight, amputation, and he fought. He was going to work while going through chemo with a bucket, so that when he needed to puke, he wouldn't have to leave his desk. In a time when most of us want to call in sick if we have a stiff headache or a slight hangover, he brought a bucket to work to throw up in, and never even told most of you he was doing that. The list went on, and so did his fight. He never gave up. He just flirted with nurses and told dirty jokes. That was my dad. He fought with honor, and he fought with class, and he fought with humor until the last day. We also learned to complain a lot less. It wasn't until about a year ago that I heard my father complain, ever. Through it all, he would say things like, "I've been through worse," or, "Hey, I'm still looking down at my feet," which became really funny when he didn't have feet anymore. I think he knew if you spent today complaining about yesterday, it would not make tomorrow any better. We learned from my father how to be a father. These lessons apply to future fathers, fathers of young children, and even you fathers here with adults. He would say, put your kids more first than first. I can't imagine the things or the times that he gave up so he could be there for Mark and myself. He missed nothing, every track meet, every concert, every party. I can't think of one single important moment in our lives that he missed. Every time we would leave to go back to college, my mom would hug me, he would shake my hand and simply say, "Drive safe," and hand me a $20 bill. $20 went a long way for knowing you on dollar pint night. My father called my mother one day from work, crying. He had been going through his wallet, and he had seen all the pictures of Mark and I growing up through the years, because he kept them with him at all times. He was crying and sobbing on the phone. She asked what was wrong, and he simply said, "They don't need me anymore." Of course, that wasn't true. He had done such a great job of raising us, though, that he might have felt that way. Every chance we got from the time I heard that story, I made sure to tell him just how much we did need him and how much we loved him. Part of being a great father sometimes means reminding your dumb kids to always call your mother. Every single important day to my mother was preceded by a phone call from my mother the day before to say, "Don't forget to call your mother for Valentine's Day, birthday, anniversary," every single time. He never forgot. The single greatest lesson a man can show his children is how much he loves his wife. You'll hear about that in a minute, because that man loved that woman with every part of his soul. So yes, we learned how to love from him, which was perhaps the easiest lesson for him to teach us, because love is so little about words. It's so much about action. And a man of few words was always a man of consistent action. So what did we learn from about love from my father? To put your wife first. Yes, even before your kids, who were first. Any interaction I've ever heard with my father saw him not take my mother's side. He would call me after any argument I had with her, and he would say, "Fix it." And I would get into this and start arguing. I would get exasperated. And I'd say, "Dad." And he would say, "Damn it, Eric, just fix it." And that was the end of the conversation, and we did. We fixed it. Because he took her side with family issues, with friend issues. He took her side. The last time that I spoke to him, which was the last time he really spoke, on January 27th, he made me promise to take care of my mother. I promised him that we would, and I expect everyone in this room to help. In this book that I bought him, there are questions that prove his understanding of love. Let me quote from it these questions. What do you remember most about being a kid? Dating your mom. What are some of your favorite things you did as a kid? Dating your mom. What were your teenage dating years like? Do you remember your first date? It was with your mom. What was your dream when you were a kid? I wanted to move out of the projects and marry your mom. When did you meet? My mother was your mother's brownie leader. We met at our house. It was raining. The date was March 6, 1960. Your mom and I have been together since 4th grade. There was never anyone else I was interested in. Someday I hope you meet a girl who makes you as happy as your mom makes me. Mission accomplished. We learned all these things about life and illness and fighting, and we also learned how to live. Through all of this, he never stopped living. He was full of life. Every story you will hear or have heard is about his life, not about his death. That will be his legacy. So let me tell you about his living. One of my favorite stories that Sheila and I have of my father is the night of our wedding. We had just ordered a pitcher of beer for the head table because the bar was closed, but we could still get drinks because it was our night. The pitcher came up, and I watched my dad watching them. And he walked up to the front table, put his cane right on the table, grabbed the pitcher, and chugged the whole thing. And he looked at me and said, "Thanks." And he walked back to sit with my mom. What a way to start what turned out to be an incredible party. Mark and I also learned how to be men from my father. Not necessarily the macho camacho tough guy man, but the when to admit when you're wrong kind of man. One thing he wrote in this book was that I had not yet learned how to compromise to get my point across. Basically, he said to me, "You can be right, and you can be stubborn, but if you're both right and stubborn, no one will think you're a better man for it." So some advice that I took from all of this above: fight. But when you fight, fight for the right things. Fight for your life, your love, your friends, and family. Complain only if you have it worse than anyone else. And my dad can tell you, someone else always has it worse. If you're fortunate enough to have kids, he told me to shut your mouth and put them first. Once you have children, he would say you have one job: make their lives better than yours, and their future better than yours. Selfish parents create selfish kids, he would say. Love, and love hard. Love with your soul. Love the person you married with everything you have. And I mean everything. Do not cheat. Do not lie. Love. You took vows when you got married, he would say. Honor them. And when things got tough, honor them more. My parents have been together since March 6th of 1960. Together. Life is not easy. The relationships will not be easy. Love will not be easy. But you should honor them the same way my parents did. They showed us love. The least we can do is prove that we learned something from it. I could have probably saved everyone here a little bit of time if I had just read the final paragraph that he wrote me in this book. He said, always, always keep your sights on your goals. Be honest. Respect other people. Do your job to the best of your ability. Your name is what people will remember, good or bad. So do your best to make it a good memory. When you find the girl you want to spend the rest of your life with, treat her with love and respect. Always be honest, because lies kill relationships. And always remember that I will always be here for you. Love, Dad. We love you too, Dad. Thanks for the lessons.